Today on Psycast, we're going to reflect on something deeply human, the quiet hunger to be liked. Let me ask you something. Have you ever left a conversation replaying it in your mind, wondering if you said the right thing, if they liked you, if you came across the way you meant to? Maybe you smiled too much or too little. Maybe your joke didn't land. Maybe you tried to sound interested but still felt like you weren't enough. We've all been there. That soft ache of wanting to be accepted. It's not vanity. It's survival. We are wired for connection, and underneath many of our daily actions, there's a small, quiet question. Do they like me? But here's the thing. No one tells you. Most people are asking themselves the exact same thing. This is why Dale Carnegie's work, especially How to Win Friends and Influence People, has lived for almost a century. It doesn't teach you how to manipulate. It teaches you how to be human in a way that others remember and feel safe around. And maybe that's the real social cheat code. Not pretending to be someone you're not, but becoming someone who truly sees people, someone who pays attention, someone who gives what they secretly long to receive. Carnegie said something that stayed with me. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. And I think that's the secret we forget when we're trying so hard to be liked. We focus on ourselves, how we look, what we'll say, how we'll sound. But the paradox is this. The more you try to impress, the more distant you feel. And the more you sincerely care, the more magnetic you become, without even trying. We live in a world of noise. Social media taught us to perform, not connect. Conversations have become platforms. Replies are curated. But something ancient in us still longs for warmth, for eye contact, for someone who doesn't interrupt, for that rare kind of presence that feels like shelter. And it's not about being perfect. It's about being real, curious, and kind. These are not tricks. They're truths. And people can feel the difference. Think about the people you remember most, the ones who made you feel at home in your own skin. It's rarely because of their status or cleverness. It's because they saw you. They laughed with you. They remembered your name. They asked how you were and waited for the answer. That's what Carnegie taught in his quiet, thoughtful way. That people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It sounds simple, but it's rare. And in a world starving for real connection, that kind of attention is almost sacred. Let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. Being liked is not about becoming what others want. It's about awakening the part of you that already knows how to love. The part of you that listens, notices, remembers. The part that doesn't speak to impress, but to connect. That doesn't dominate the room, but gently holds space for others to rise. That's what people respond to. Not the performance, but the presence. But there's a deeper question beneath all this. Why do we want so badly to be liked in the first place? It's not just about being social. It's about being safe. Liking, in our minds, is often tied to belonging. And belonging is tied to survival. We may live in cities and scroll through digital timelines now, but inside us still lives the ancient child who once depended on the tribe to stay alive. Being rejected wasn't just painful. It was dangerous. That's the part of us that flinches when someone rolls their eyes, or forgets our name, or seems disinterested. It's not vanity. It's vulnerability. A soft mammalian fear that maybe we're not enough to be kept around. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because once you do, you stop adjusting who you are for the sake of being palatable. You stop shrinking, editing, pleasing. And that, ironically, is when you start being liked for something real. Not for your polish, but your presence. Not for being agreeable, but for being authentic. But authenticity doesn't mean saying everything you think or rebelling against approval. It means showing up honestly, with warmth, with curiosity, with care, even when you're unsure. People don't fall in love with confidence. They fall in love with sincerity. And sometimes, that sincerity looks like soft eyes and open silence. It looks like a nervous laugh that doesn't apologize for itself. It looks like listening not just to reply, but to understand. We forget how rare that is. Most people are never really listened to. They're endured, or tolerated, or responded to with rehearsed empathy. But you can be different, not by knowing the right words, but by being fully present. That alone is magnetic. There's a quiet shift that happens when we stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, how can I understand them better? It's not about abandoning yourself. It's about stepping out of the mirror and into the world, about softening the spotlight that's always turned inward and turning it outward instead, toward the person in front of you, their fears, their stories, their invisible ache to be seen too. Because here's the strange beauty. When you make someone feel safe, they begin to associate that safety with you. And slowly, you become not just liked, but trusted. And in a world that's forgotten how to trust, that's a quiet kind of power. There's something else we don't talk about enough. The silent cost of always trying to be liked. It wears on the soul, gently at first, then heavily. It teaches you to scan every room, every face, every silence, asking yourself if you're doing okay in their eyes. It teaches you to edit your truth in real time, to round your sharp edges, to perform ease even when your heart is anything but easy. And worst of all, it slowly convinces you that being chosen by others is more important than choosing yourself. But here's the quiet truth I had to learn. Being liked is not the same as being loved, and it's definitely not the same as being respected. Sometimes we bend ourselves into likable versions not because we're kind, but because we're afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of rejection, afraid that who we really are might be too much or not enough. But what begins as fear slowly becomes habit. And what becomes habit eventually becomes identity. Until one day you wake up and realize that the person people like isn't really you. That realization hurts, but it's also a door. Because you can't truly be loved until you let yourself be seen. And you can't be seen while hiding behind the mask of being pleasant, easy, or perfect. As Brené Brown reminds us, connection requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires the courage to be disliked by some. That's the paradox we all wrestle with. To belong, you have to be real. But when you're real, you risk not being liked. And yet, that's the only way to be loved. So, what do we do with this? We stop seeking to be universally accepted and start seeking alignment. Not everyone will like you. Not everyone is meant to. But the right ones, the honest ones, the ones who see with the heart, they'll find you. And they won't be drawn to your perfection. They'll be drawn to your presence, your particular way of laughing, your odd metaphors, your quiet pauses, the way you look up when you're thinking. That's what people fall in love with. Not a version of you that's been sanded smooth, but the one that's textured, flawed, and alive. And maybe that's the real cheat code. To stop trying to be liked by everyone and instead become deeply known by a few. Because in the end, the people who truly matter won't just like you. They'll understand you. They'll see your inner world not as something to fix, but something to cherish. And in their presence, you'll no longer feel the need to prove anything. You'll just be. Let's talk now about something almost invisible, but deeply felt. The energy you bring into a room. People rarely remember everything you say, but they remember how you made them feel. That's not just poetic. It's psychological. Human beings are emotional creatures first, rational thinkers second. And in every interaction, there's an unspoken layer, a mood, a vibe, a felt sense. You might say all the right things, but if your energy is tense, guarded, or self-focused, people will feel that. We're more intuitive than we realize. We sense when someone is pretending to listen, or when their smile doesn't reach their eyes. We sense desperation disguised as friendliness. And we also sense something else, something rare and unforgettable, when someone is truly at ease with themselves. That kind of presence is magnetic, not because it demands attention, but because it creates space. It invites others to relax, to open, to breathe more deeply. And that kind of ease doesn't come from charm. It comes from inner work, from having sat with your own fears, from having softened your own self-judgment. When you no longer need every moment to go perfectly, you become the person others feel safe around, because your peace gives them permission to stop performing too. James Clear, in his work on habits, reminds us that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. I think something similar happens in relationships. You don't rise to the level of your best intentions. You fall to the level of your self-awareness. The more you understand your own patterns, your triggers, your quiet fears, the more you can show up without projecting them onto others. That's what real social intelligence is. Not technique, presence, not tactics, clarity, not control, curiosity. And curiosity is powerful. When you're genuinely curious about someone, their story, their emotions, even their silence, they feel it. Most people live inside a constant experience of being overlooked, rushed through, interrupted. But when you offer your full presence, unhurried, undemanding, it feels like sunlight, like something they forgot they needed. The irony is, most of us are so focused on making an impression that we forget to make a connection. But impressions fade. Connections stay. They're not built on being impressive. They're built on being present. And presence is something you cultivate, not by trying harder, but by softening, by noticing your breath, by letting go of the need to prove, by remembering that every person you meet carries their own invisible story. And maybe what they need most is not your brilliance, but your calm. Let me tell you something strange, but true. The more you like yourself, the less you need others to. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop depending. There's a difference. Approval becomes a gift, not a necessity. Rejection stings, but it doesn't shatter. You start to notice how many of your social fears came not from others, but from your own unspoken belief that you weren't enough as you were, that you had to earn your place at the table, that you had to manage everyone's perception of you, like a fragile glass sculpture. But when you begin to like yourself, not in an inflated, arrogant way, but in a grounded, gentle way, something shifts. You become less frantic, less eager to fill every silence, less likely to over-explain. You don't perform warmth, you feel it. You don't chase connection, you allow it. Because you're no longer walking into rooms hoping they'll tell you who you are. You already know. And that knowing is quiet, but powerful. This is what Viktor Frankl hinted at when he wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." He wasn't talking about pretending. He was talking about transformation, about finding meaning in your own experience, about learning to stand still in a world that constantly tells you to adjust. When you've been through your own inner storm and made peace with your complexity, you stop trying to be simple for others. You show up as you are, and those who are ready, they stay. Because here's the deeper truth. People don't just like you for what you offer. They're drawn to your energy, your honesty, your calm, your subtle sense of wholeness. The paradox is, the more you try to be liked, the more you hide the very things that make you lovable. Your hesitations, your quirks, your unpolished moments. But when you own them, not as flaws, but as part of your texture, you become someone who others feel safe around. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And liking yourself is not about looking in the mirror and repeating affirmations. It's about actions, boundaries, forgiveness, speaking kindly to yourself after a mistake, letting yourself rest without guilt, listening to your body, trusting your instincts, saying no when something doesn't feel right. These are the ways you slowly build a relationship with yourself. And once you do, you stop handing strangers the authority to define your worth. That's the quiet revolution. Not shouting your confidence, but simply being at peace. Not needing to be liked, but still being likable. Because your presence is honest, grounded, and kind. And that is unforgettable. So maybe we end here, not with another rule, but with a return. A return to something you've always had, but perhaps forgot, your own enoughness. There's a moment, usually quiet, when you realize you no longer need to chase approval like air. When you sit with yourself, not in loneliness, but in company, your own company. And it doesn't feel empty. It feels like truth. Because something in you remembers, you were never supposed to mold yourself into everyone's favorite flavor. You were supposed to become someone deeply real. And that kind of realness, not everyone will like it. But the ones who do, they won't just like you. They'll stay. The irony is, this entire journey toward being liked leads you back to the person you were before the world told you who to be. It leads you back to the child who laughed without checking if it was too loud, who asked questions without worrying if they were dumb, who offered kindness without wondering if it would be returned. That child didn't try to be likable. They just were, until something or someone convinced them that who they were wasn't quite enough, that being themselves was risky. And so they learned to edit, to watch, to perform, to scan faces for approval, to stay in line. But now, as an adult, you get to unlearn that. Slowly, softly, you get to drop the performance and return to your presence. You get to like yourself in the quiet moments, not because someone else validated you, but because you see your own sincerity, your own effort, your own gentle heart. That's what creates real confidence. Not ego, not applause, but a deep inner trust in your own intention. And when that's there, people feel it, even before you speak. Because liking yourself is not about convincing the world. It's about coming home to yourself. And when you do, when you no longer need every conversation to affirm your value, when you stop reading every expression as a verdict, you become free. You listen better, you love better, you live better. And the beautiful paradox is, people are drawn to that freedom. They don't always know why. They just feel safe, seen, calm. And maybe that's what being likable really is. Not being pleasing, but being whole. So, if you've been waiting for permission to stop trying so hard, here it is. Let it be enough. Let yourself be enough. You don't have to win everyone. You just have to be real with someone. And that someone might just start with you.